On a Friday.
Episode 13.
On a Friday. Come on.
Oh, man. It's
No black cats.
No,
No
it's
ladders.
lucky for everybody everybody except the Knights Templar, right? That's where the unlucky Friday the 13th came from. Did you know that?
No, I did
Oh,
not.
you got to check into the history on that. That's crazy. So the King of France wiped out the entire Knights Templar on Friday the 13th because the entire nation of France basically owed all their money to the Knights Templar. And
kill the bankers.
Yeah. So they're like, we either pay him back or we kill him. So yeah. So you got to look up that. Yeah.
I've heard some say that maybe all of them weren't killed.
That's absolutely right. That's what I was. Yeah. So and then that's how some fled supposedly to Scotland and things like that, because that's where they had some safe haven and things. And then Nova Scotia, and oh man, then the theory goes from there on out. So yeah. Happy 13th episode on Friday. So
exactly.
We're going to be talking about something that sounds just as scary and fearful as Friday the 13th is to some people, and that's 3 letters, KPI. Give me your impression on KPIs right off the bat. Are you fearful of them? What immediately comes to mind when you hear those 3 letters?
It's a mixed bag. I think almost any company nowadays, they talk about KPIs, how they're used, and we're going to get into this, Brian, right? How they're used, how they're determined, what they're used for. Are they aligned with, True North, all those things? And so they can be as damaging to an organization and the culture on one side to they drive incredible behaviors, are aligned with True North, and really make sure that your stakeholders, your shareholders, your customers, and your team, your coworkers are being taken care of. So we're gonna dial this in so we go that way versus the right. Negative, you're gonna want to kill the KPI guys,
right?
So when they come marching along.
Yeah. KPIs can drive a stake in the ground to show a measurement of where you are and where you need to be, or it can drive a stake in the heart of your company.
Exactly. We're going to stay away from that. I love how this is coming together, this theme.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk about KPIs, what they are, how they're used, how you use them, how you see them used, and how I have seen them used, abused, and ignored in the small business, family businesses in my industries that I'm familiar with. So KPIs right off the bat are key performance indicators. They're simply areas that we have deemed worthy of measurement, and then attesting a measurement to that and a goal, basically. Am I correct there in ultra simplifying it?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can't have a KPI without first having an area that is important to be measured.
That is a great way of starting to talk about alignment. 100%.
Right. So build on that a little bit.
So the KPI, typically they're tied with an output, right? So they're a result of some process, a value stream, whatever those things are. And to your point, we want to align them to activities that are critical to the organization around, could be customer retention and loyalty, could be quality. Some are tied to your financials. But they're the key things, as we talked about with the business. Do we have our True North? Do we have our theme? What did you call it, Brian? Rather than the mission or vision, we call it the
motivating statement.
Motivating statement, right?
Yeah.
Motivating statement. So if you know what those things are, and then we talked about having 3 economic measures. right? So if we're cascading down from the very top, our North Star, our primary purpose, primary aim, go through those economic measures, those three important economic measures, and then we also talked about critical actions. It's very easy then to start to talk about, well, what would be some KPIs we could put in place that would tell us how we're doing, right? It would tell us that of the things that we're working towards, how are we doing? And of course, they're a backwards look, right? Because they're telling you information about things that have happened in the past.
Yeah. Yep. So I have down a KPI is a quantifiable measure used to evaluate how well an organization, a team, or individual is achieving specific business objectives over a set period of time. KPIs provide clear targets, track progress, and offer insights to guide decision-making and improve performance. The biggest thing I see here is that it is measurable. It holds people accountable. It allows clarity to just permeate your business, because every task has an associated, let's say not every task, every major task that you deem important in every organization and every department should have a corresponding KPI to know whether or not that major task or primary task is being achieved. It's that simple. We think of it as oh man, it's all right. We got to get deep. We got to dig right into it. It's got to be some crazy formula that's second only to E = MC squared. It's not like that.
Yeah, I like, so in the manufacturing world, a lot of work centers will use 4 key KPIs. Now, sometimes they're called metrics. So KPIs usually are that big number, the big outcome.
Right.
But when you get down to like a department or work center level, safety usually comes first, right? So the cool thing, to your point, Brian, is if you do, so the 4 are safety, quality, productivity, and delivery. So safety is all about, doing things the right way, the safe way. We're not rushing through things, and we're tracking, hopefully you're tracking the right metric to prevent any safety issues. Quality, if you're not doing it safely and you're not building a quality product, you might as well stop right there, because the rest of the measures don't matter. Your customer, your coworkers are going to get hurt, or you're sending garbage to your customer. And then there's productivity, which is a measure of inputs versus outputs. How are we doing there? And then delivery, which is usually the critical one. We made a commitment to the customer. Are we able to keep that commitment? The cool thing is you can dial each one of those in for each department based on what work you're doing, right? So you can have the metric for the company. So you can have a delivery metric saying, what percentage of time do we deliver on our first delivery promise? And then at the department level, you can say, how good am I at delivering on doing my part of the process according to schedule, right? So our piece is, what can I do to impact the bigger measure? And then, but the final measure is, no matter what, did we make the product that the customer wanted? Did we deliver it on time at the cost they expected? So to your point, these are all relevant measures, and if you can listen to those that I just talked about, they cover all 3 areas of the triangle, that tension triangle: owners of the company, coworkers, and the customer. And when you talk about just those 4 metrics, that covers all 3 bases.
Right. And the KPIs are the support system for that goal, whatever that goal is, whether it's in your department. Maybe you have a departmental goal of your safety. We want to have the safest department in the company. Okay, how are we going to achieve that? Well, first of all, we're gonna raise our injury timeline where it's been, 100 days. Now we're going to shoot for 120. That is a KPI. That's something that's clear and measurable. And everybody, one of the biggest advantages, for a KPI, I think, is that not only does it increase accountability and clarity, but it opens the conversation up with everybody on the team, because all of a sudden it isn't Bob's personality, or oh, he's just passive aggressive, or this or that. No, we're actually looking right at the numbers. And that's what I like. And when we can look at a number, it takes any personality issues, which there can be a lot when you're working in a close-knit environment, whether it's a big company or a little company. It takes that and throws it out the window.
The other thing I like, Brian, is when you look at let's talk about on-time delivery, right, at the company level. So we're going to look at, let's say we make 100 units a month up to 100 different customers. We're going to measure how many of those units were delivered on time. And when I say on time, I mean the first commitment we made to the customer. Because a lot of times you'll hear, well, we said we would deliver by July 1. And that we took the order June 1st. But then subsequent to that, something happened. So we called the customer back and go, can we move the date to July 15th? Well, okay, we just reset expectations. If that happens a lot of times, and we deliver on the 15th, a lot of times the customer is like, hey, cool. But you made a promise for the first. So what happened? So the other thing you look at then is, if you're tracking, and let's say we're making a product, right, 100 a month, and it's going through a sequence of steps to get built. If each area says that they're hitting their on-time delivery, or they're on time, they're on schedule, but our outcome measure says, right, we're only 75% of the time we're hitting that customer expectation. To your point, they would go back and go, we're not looking at people, we're looking and saying, how can every single workstation or department do everything on time and on schedule, and yet we're not delivering to the customer on time? So what's going on there? And when you ask that question, you're not saying who's causing the issue. It's like, how can this entire system be built to focus on doing things on time, and yet we can't deliver to the customer on time? That's a great conversation to have.
Absolutely.
So the top line measure is the actual outcome based on everything we've done, but all along the way we can say is, can we detect where we're having problems? And if you're saying you're not having problems and yet you're not delivering on time, now it's time to peel back and go, what's actually going on here, and are these measurements correct at the department level?
Right. One of the key things that the KPI does is it takes the focus off of the who and onto the what. Okay. Not who is the problem, but what is the issue that we're wrestling with? Then secondarily, once we've determined what the issue is, who can we bring in to solve this issue, to mediate it, to eliminate it? And that's what's great, because then that immediately increases buy-in and increases engagement, top of the line. So that's fantastic. Absolutely. I think that one of the things, well, here's what I want to do. I want to ask you, give me some real life examples, just real quickly, of KPIs that you've seen that have been effective in your industries that you work with manufacturing, education, that type of thing.
Yeah, I would say that the four I mentioned, Brian, are critical, because they're fractal, meaning that I can look at the company level and say, okay, what's our safety? How have we done safety? It used to be, has anybody got hurt? And we've gone away from that, and it's talking about now about near misses, or unreportable, because some incidents, right? If somebody gets hurt, you have to actually report to OSHA.
Right.
If those are the key indicators, man, there's a lot of gap between a reportable incident, or somebody got hurt to the point where you need to report it, versus something happened in between. And we got to the point where we actually measured near misses. So if you have lift trucks and order pickers on a distribution floor in a warehouse, if you had a near miss, meaning nothing happened, nobody got hurt. I shouldn't say nothing happened. Nobody got hurt, no damage to property or anything, but two people almost hit each other with equipment. that you want to have a conversation around, because it's like, how did you even get to the point where you almost hit each other? So one of the things I want to get into, and I'll just mention now, where I've seen these work really well, Brian, is where initially, if you're not using them today, is just start to get a baseline and start to measure over time, whether it's a daily measure, weekly measure, and just start to look at what's the number, how is it behaving? That's the start.
Yeah,
So you could see a huge,
absolutely.
you could see a huge
Absolutely.
goal or a huge gap between where we're at today and the goal you want. Don't matter.
Yeah.
Just start tracking. So you're saying
And
yes. I want to hear
I
your input
have
on
to
this.
interrupt you on this because this is super cool. I just implemented this part into a client's corporation up in New York, and it is super neat. We were just basically getting the leadership team just to start measuring things. And it's so neat how technology has allowed us to simply do this, setting up a very simple Google form. Yes, no, yes, no. What are our measurements on this? Did this? And all of a sudden, man, you can see them becoming better leaders just by preparing this measurement. Now, we haven't even gone into improving it yet. So we're still at the design and measure stage, so we haven't even, analyzed and improved it yet, but it's providing such clarity of conversation, and the meetings are efficient. It's fantastic. And are they perfect? Are these the right KPIs that we should have? No, they weren't. I had to add some afterwards because I was like, oh, wait, there's an issue here. Well, if you see an issue, then attach a KPI that can go with it. Here's my example. They were having a lot of absenteeism or tardy. Their employees were tardy. And so I was like, well, okay, let's just start measuring that on a weekly basis. Who has been late and who has been absent or had a shift change, and just, has that happened? Yes or no? If no, if yes, then who was it and what was the situation? All of a sudden, it was like providing clarity. And I was like, oh, wait, okay, maybe there's an issue here. Well, how can we solve this? And then, so I love what you're saying there, because just start measuring it. Don't worry if you haven't perfected yet, or, oh, wait, am I measuring the top 5 things? You may not be. So cross off that one after a couple weeks.
Right.
The mindset it's setting for you to be somebody who is not just a doer, but is an analyzer and therefore a creator and improver in your business. That is fantastic.
Yeah. So I think 3 things there. So one is just get the baseline and start tracking it. 2, this should probably be the first. You talked about it. What's the operational definition? How do you define that KPI? And everybody has to be on track with how that's being done, or excuse me, what the definition is. And then we also have to talk about how do you get that metric. And so if you get those nailed down, then, and this is the perfect segue to our episode 14, which is, how do you look at that data and then start making improvements from it? Right now, we're saying just start tracking it, and it will start a dialogue, guaranteed.
So I'm going to tell you, this applies to every business. I don't care if you're running Sam's hot dog stand. It doesn't matter. You're going to measure how many hot dogs did we sell this week? Okay. Well, how many add-ons of French fries did we do? How long did people have to wait for their average hot dog? Was that a problem? Was it not? So it doesn't matter. I mean, you could be talking about a hot dog stand and then right on up to a multi-million-dollar manufacturing company that's concerned about safety and output and, that type of thing, and has OSHA breathing down their neck,
Right. So what I like about what you said, Brian, is you start to see, and again, we're talking about now putting a stake through the heart of your culture or your company, right?
Right.
But improving aligning with your North Star, your primary aim. So one, you talked about leadership starts to behave differently because you're starting to understand, right, those critical KPIs, what's going on. Another behavior you're going to see is, and you want to make sure you track this, you're going to start to hear from the teams because they should have exposure to the numbers. They're going to start to come to you and say, hey, I saw this thing spike up yesterday, and I want you to know something happened. And what they'll start to see is you'll start to see what appears to be sort of normal output, whatever that is, whatever that measure is. And then you may see something where there's a spike up or a spike down. When that shows up, you won't have to ask the question, because if the team's watching those KPIs, they're going to come and say, ooh, guess what? Here's what happened yesterday. Write it down, right? Make a note. Here's the day. Here's what happened. Because now your team's starting to engage with, here are things that are influencing that system, whatever it is, a process, a value stream. Something's happening and it affected your KPI in a significant way, meaning it's not a bunch of noise. And noise is where things are pretty consistent over time. But when you see a signal where that number changes dramatically in a single day, guess what? Your team, and if they don't come to you, just say, hey, we saw this jump yesterday. Anybody have some idea? And again, to your point, it's not about identifying a person. It's saying what conditions surrounded this shift in that KPI for the day or for the week, whatever it is. And as you start asking those questions, when these things start to happen, before the end of the day, you'll hear about it. So before you post that KPI next day, you already know what happened. And you already know it's going to be influenced by that activity, whatever that was.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind, there is so much flexibility with KPIs. They can be big, they can be small. And then the timeline on it. You don't have to measure a KPI every day. Certain things you do want to. So just so that the listeners don't feel that we're overburdening them with, we do not want you measuring your business all the time, and that's the only thing that you're doing. That's a huge waste of your talents. You just need to know, hey, how many times do I have to measure this to make sure it stays accurate? And that's it. That's it. If it has to be a day, fine. If it can be a week, bi-weekly, or monthly, that's okay too. So it does not, some of it's quarterly and annually, right. You're really not going to want to do an inventory analysis every day.
Exactly.
Unless you have Sam's hot dog stand, of course.
Exactly. And the other piece then is, to your point, it might be the right KPI, meaning you named it correctly, but the way you measure it may not be the best. Or to your point, if I measure this one monthly, I want to get a leading indicator of what's actually happening. So to your point, on a weekly basis, I'd be measuring a metric at a department level that then feeds that outcome KPI. So at a company level, yep, we're looking at it once a month. But within could be on a weekly basis, we're actually measuring a process metric that feeds into that KPI and gives us a running start to say, ooh, if I see a shift in that process metric, I know that it's going to impact my KPI right. for the end of the month. And that's where you're starting to intervene and say, when that happens, let's have a conversation, even before we measure it in the department, so we can start to put in corrective actions, countermeasures, those kinds of things to try to solve that. Because if you wait until the end of the month, the closer you can get to the feedback, if something happens, the closer you are to getting feedback on that happening, the better. If you wait till the end of the month and then go back and go, well, what happened? Well, I remember on, so what is today, the 27th? So I get to the end of the month and then I go, I think on June 3rd, something happened, but I don't. So now it's gone, right? Yeah. Versus, hey, this happened yesterday. We're going to make a note of it. It impacted our metric. We're going to make note of it. And so when somebody asks the question, again, this isn't cover your butt. It is to say, hey, this happened. It's going to have an impact on our KPI for the month. But, oh, by the way, here's the things we put in place, countermeasures. Right. or we just made a simple change in our process, boom. And now we don't expect to have that happen again. That's the power of KPIs.
And I think you bring up a great point. Over document starting off. Don't be afraid to over document starting off, and then a week, 2 weeks down the road, you realize, oh, okay, I don't really need to keep track of that aspect. That's fine. Eliminate it. When you go to review everything, just eliminate that part. But it's a lot better than trying to do the reverse, like you said. Trying to remember what happened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, or in my case, 2 hours ago, And so I'm going to touch on my take here. To make it for us small business owners to fully get to maximize KPIs and to get them implemented in the business, 5 steps. 1, determine what to measure. Ask yourself, first of all, what's important with it? What's important? What are the top goals, or like you said earlier, the 3 economic objectives that you want that are going to help the business succeed? Number 2, determine you want to measure them. You covered on this also. How are we going to measure it? If it's inventory, are we going to measure it inventory turnover rate? If it's inventory versus revenue stream, how are you going to measure it? And try that out. Okay, so determine how you want to measure it. And then I would actually say, in conjunction with that, determine how often you want to measure it, and start a little more often than you think. Starting off, and then you can scale it back. 3rd, set up a KPI, or that target goal, that specific number that you're going to shoot for. Communicate. Number 4, communicate and measure this regularly with your team. That is probably one of the biggest things that small businesses will drop the ball on. They'll start measuring it, and they won't have a clear system of communicating it regularly, openly, sustainably with their team. And then what happens? It becomes like those mission statements we talked about that nobody looks at and is a joke, And the last aspect, the 5th aspect, is have an SOP, or a standard operating procedure, set up, if you can, with the KPIs to improve it. Now that's going off on a deeper end, but have another 3-letter acronym that people hate, SOPs, but really SOPs are just STEPs, steps. That's all. SOPs are just standard operating procedures, are just steps that are always taken to properly do this process. That's it. So that's my take on it. What's yours?
The only thing I would add is I love this. Once you do this at the company level, then, as we mentioned, take it down to whatever levels. In a smaller organization, it's literally down to people, but they're wearing a hat, some hat for some role or a department, and say, how does your department impact that KPI? So let's start to talk about metrics within your organization, your area of responsibility, so that they see that it isn't just this number that just lands at the end of the month for the company. It is, we have a part of that. So we are going to start to identify and line up our metric to the company KPI. And we're going to do the same exact thing, go through those same 5 steps that you did. But now I'm going to do that at the next level down, which is department, work center, or even just a role, and do the same thing. And if you do that across the organization, think about the conversation you're going to have, because it's like, well, hey, we were green on all of our metrics for the month. And then people look at each other saying, we were all green, but your company measures don't look good, right? Some of them are red. That's a great conversation to have. It's like, well, what could cause that to happen? We talked about that earlier in the episode here. Or they're all green and they stayed green, or, hey, we were red a couple of times, but this other department helped jump in, helped us out, got to jump on the delivery date, brought some additional people in to help, and we were able to overcome that and still hit our goal at the end.
Absolutely.
So you're having a conversation about the teamwork that's happening during the day, week, month to solve problems. And it isn't, ultimately isn't to hit that KPI. Those KPIs are in place to tell us, are we doing the right things on behalf of the owners of the business, our customers, and our teams?
And
That's
how
it.
can we improve?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Key performance improvement areas.
Yeah.
So I look at
That's it in a nutshell.
That's
isn't
it. That's it. I look at it as KPIs can be like bagpipes. Okay. Stay with me.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
I'm taking a
Come
deep
on.
breath.
No. Why do you have to
Please.
be so cynical when I come up with an analogy like this?
No, I mean, we've gone from the Knights Templar to bagpipes. I mean, we're covering Europe
We're
in a day.
staying in Scotland, you know? That's it. So KPIs can be like bagpipes. They can either kill your team and absolutely be something that everybody hates. You have a bagpipe played in a small room, there is nothing worse. That's like strangling a banshee. But you have a bagpipe way off in the distance playing with an echo and everything. It is absolutely beautiful and amazing. So a KPI, if it's used the right way, in the right context, by the right person, and it can really build on the both the productivity, but also the emotional factor of each of the team members and the engagement and then the clarity of purpose of knowing, wow, this is what we're shooting for, and then this is why we're shooting